for coming. Tonight I'm going to open the meeting for the Raleigh Planning Board for tonight, Wednesday, January 30th, 2019. Tonight's meeting is really just an informational session. We're here to discuss some proposals that the board is considering and the town is discussing for consideration by the town at the upcoming spring town meeting. What we're considering is some zoning changes within the town, and while they're all three separate issues, they're all unrelated. The first two are really initiatives that are adopted by the town to consider finding ways to create more of a commercial tax base in this town, frankly. It is the reason we're looking to add commercial properties and creating a zoning district where some commercial properties could consider locating themselves. Right now, the areas that we're considering, in fact, the first two are areas that are currently in the outlying district, and we're considering changing them to the business light industrial district. So the first item I guess we should probably look at and discuss is the zoning map change for Route 1 or Newbury Turnpike, which we're considering changing the zoning from outlying district to business light industrial. So the first thing I think is worth noting is exactly where we're talking about. And so specifically, what we're looking at is the part of town on Route 1 north of Weathersfield. And if you see on the map that's been included and passed around, there's some very specific parcels that the town is considering including in this new zoning district. Now, one thing I think is worth noting is that if we change the zoning, nothing necessarily changes in that. It's still private land. It's up to the landowner to decide what they're going to do in terms of how they want to use the property. And in fact, if the landowners decide to do nothing, then nothing would change. It would give the opportunity for those owners to nonetheless, if the zoning change were to go forward, they could petition the planning board to allow certain commercial uses and light industrial uses. And depending on the type of activity, it would require a special permit review in addition to a site plan review. Currently, it's outlying district, which means that the only thing they can do as a matter of right is residential construction, or pardon me, residential development, unless they're a pre-existing non-conforming use, which many of the lots out on Route 1 currently are pre-existing non-conforming uses, meaning that they were in existence, pardon me, the use was in existence before the zoning bylaw was adopted for that area. And this would allow the planning board to review any proposed use as well as any proposed change in use from what they're currently doing. So where right now, if a property in that outlying district were to seek to change its use, there'd be some significant restrictions on that. Specifically, they'd have to demonstrate that they are a non-conforming use and that the new use is no more invasive or no longer, pardon me, no more detrimental than the current use. But there's a very limited discretion for the board for the zoning board of appeals to allow that use to change. This would allow the board to consider any number of different uses that are allowable in the business light industrial district. And I think that might give the opportunity for some of those existing properties that are perhaps underutilized as construction lots to, depending on the ownership and the intended intentions of the owner and developer, it would allow different types of businesses to go into those locations, and the town could, for the first time in a long time, put those properties under site plan review, which would mean that we would, while they could develop, they'd have to do it in accordance with the guidelines that this board has developed for that purpose. So I think at this point, the most important thing is, because it's an information session, is to open it up to any comments that anyone on the board or probably in the community may have. So, ma'am, go ahead.
Yes, good evening, Chairman Thornton and planning board members and Mr. Baker and members of the audience. My name is Karen Herrick, And my husband and I, my husband Nick, we've lived at Fox Meadows for 12 years now. And I'm very pleased and proud that I have been on the board at Fox Meadows since 2008. I'm about to read a letter from our association regarding the matter at hand. And the letter provides an overview of the land parcels involved in the proposed rezoning change. All parcels are now classified as, Chairman Thornton just said, as outlying district. Chairman, are there still 29 parcels involved? Or
I'm going to defer to the planner to tell us exactly what.
It's actually minus, it's probably 25 because we subtracted off several parcels. The parcels that were really at the corner of Weathersfield and Route 1, the Exoret property, that was partially included. That's been completely taken out. So there are, and all the other parcels that front on Weathersfield have been taken out. So there's nothing, and as you can see there, on the east side of Route 1, it starts just north of Exoret's property. That residential house next to Samar's is the first house, and then on the other side, on the west side, everything starting north just of the winery would be subject to rezoning.
Right, because originally, when the last hearing, we were going to have a hearing in November, there were 30 parcels, so it's minus 5.
And we said that it's about 5. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The address, if should have been in the town common today. Or I believe let's see. Today would have been the first day the legal ad for the actual public hearing, which by the way will be here on February 13th. Actually has all the parcel addresses listed out, so they're all in that ad. So if you want to see if your parcel is included, take a look at that ad. If you can't find it, give me a call, and I can give you the list.
Very good, thank you very much for the clarification. One of the things, this letter is going to provide an overview of land parcels that are involved in this proposed zoning change. All, as I mentioned, and some people have compared it, I've heard it, I've read it, that, it's just some more commercial development, just like south of these parcels on Route 1. Now, if you look at south of these parcels on Route 1, there are newer developments, a lot of newer ones, and they are, a lot of them they're characterized by well-landscaped, medium to large buildings are on it. On the parcels, they're significantly set back from the road, and in some cases, they're even hidden from view by trees and vegetation. And most of them are on large parcels. And in many cases, there's significant roadside trees and vegetation on either side. They're not next to another property. So what does that mean? It means when you go by them, provides a really nice view and a nice impression of Raleigh. Now, are these parcels, if they're developed, can they be compared to that kind of development? Well, you can decide for yourself after, if we talk about the nature of the parcels. This letter presents concerns and expectations of our association members. Many of these concerns impact not only our association, but they stand to impact everyone who lives in Raleigh. And the letter will state the association's position on the proposed rezoning. The letter to Raleigh Planning Board members and Kurt Baker, Town Planner, from the Board of Trustees, Fox Meadows Condominium Association, 545 Newburyport Turnpike. The date, January 30th, 2019, and it's regarding the proposed Newburyport Turnpike rezoning change, OD to BLI. Dear Planning Board members and Mr. Baker, Fox Meadows Condominium Association is a development comprised of 28 townhouses. The parcels involved in the proposed OD to BLI Newburyport Turnpike rezoning. The proposed zoning change involves, and as of last week, it was 29 land parcels currently in an OD zoning district along an only 3/4 of a mile stretch of Route 1. Now, it's hard to imagine, 3/4 of a mile. In other words, it's 3/4 of a mile is this very short length of road. Not a lot of road there. And the Raleigh, and most of these are quite small in size. There's a very large one that happens to be a field parcel that, on the right-hand side, is right next door to Fox Meadows. There is a distinct, the Raleigh Assessors Database, this is what's kind of interesting. The Raleigh Assessors Database shows that out of these 29 parcels, 19 of them are owned by 19 separate entities. So it's not like there's, big adjoining tracts of land that's owned by one people. 5 entities own 2 parcels. So you've got a lot of small parcels in a small 3/4 of a mile owned by 19 separate entities, and 5 people own 2 parcels. There is the distinct possibility of many small commercial enterprises resulting, which would create a high-density situation on this small stretch of roadway. Our association's concerns include, but are not limited to, road safety, added traffic, including additional heavy vehicles and its braking, turning into and exiting many small commercial enterprises on a only 2-lane highway, already proven dangerous stretch of state road, which would pose an increased threat to the safety of us and everyone who travels on that road, in this section of the road. There have been many serious and fatal accidents on this section of roadway, with the most recent fatality occurring in June 2018. Just 7 months before that, there was another serious accident that required, in this stretch, that required the victim to be airlifted to a Boston hospital. Are we the only ones that don't think it's safe? Well, per selectmen minutes, at a special selectmen's meeting held on June 18th, 2018, it was stated that for 10 years the town has petitioned the state unsuccessfully to install a traffic stoplight at the Central Street, Glen Street, Newburyport Turnpike intersection. At the selectmen's meeting held on June 21st, 2018, it was said that even if a light was approved by the state, it would take years to finalize the funding and construction. Selectman Perry said, and this is quotes from the minutes, he is at the intersection of Wethersfield Street and Route 1 at least twice per day, and the volume of traffic is ridiculous. He said 15 to 20 cars go by while he is waiting at the intersection. In the past, the town has also unsuccessfully petitioned the state for a light at this intersection. It was decided at that meeting to send another request from the state. What they've done in the past is they've come out and collected data and refused. They have come out and collected data, so let's see what they're going to do. Now, with traffic resulting from the advent of marijuana sales on Route 1 and marijuana recreational shops in New Hampshire not legalized, in addition to increased traffic concerns from BLI zoning of so many small parcels, grave safety concerns stand to result. At the Selectmen's meeting held on January 7th, 2019, per their minutes, the Selectmen gave permission to receive quotes to build a recycling center in the land parcel that's involved in this across from Olive's Cafe, which, if implemented, would also generate a great deal of traffic. Another concern we have is rural character. A change to a BLI zoning classification would greatly negatively impact the current rural natural vegetation character, home to wildlife, which now comprises the majority of these parcels. The look and feel that accounts for a significant reason why many people in our association and in our town have chosen to live and invest in Raleigh. Potential impacts on the desirability of Raleigh is another concern. Route 1, a well-traveled alternate route for Route 95, is passed through by individuals who are unfamiliar with Raleigh and who form opinions about Raleigh or change their opinions by what they see. High density and or under-maintained appearances can negatively impact those individuals' thoughts, as well as the thoughts of individuals from the surrounding area passing through when anyone is considering a move from their current location. Desirability can bring about higher home prices. And it can also, the reverse can happen. And instead of higher home prices, which makes the seller happy, and more tax revenue, that's going to, the opposite can increase. We want more tax revenue, we want higher prices for our property. Our position: the association is adamant that the parcels involved in this proposed rezoning change remain classified as outlying district, no change. We expect compliance, and for the time's sake, I'm not going to be reading the parcel numbers and things like that. I just want to finish this so everybody has a chance, plenty of time to express their thoughts. We expect compliance to any and all wetlands regulations and bylaws pertaining to the involved land parcels. And now I'm talking about 599 Newburyport Turnpike, which is the field parcel on the north side of the Fox Meadows property line.
Ms. Herrick, at this point, though, I appreciate your comments, and I do think you've raised a lot of issues. I'm hoping some of these issues overlap with some of the concerns that the rest of the community has. This really is just an informational session. We have 1 hour to get through these 3 items, and this is really, as an informational session, is a preliminary hearing leading into an actual open meeting that the town is going to have to consider these items. So, as far as the specificity and the lot designations, I don't think we need to.
We don't need that.
Yeah.
But our property is right on Route 1. The people at our property pay approximately $240,000 of revenue to the town of Raleigh. I have a very short amount of information to go over, but I really think they deserve to be heard. Do you agree?
I believe that you've been heard at this point. I do think I want to open it up to anybody else that would like to have to comment.
Excuse me, I don't quite understand that. I have 2 other points to make, and I'm not being allowed to do it.
I'm sorry, Ms. Herrick. At this point, we have 1 hour to get through 3 agenda items. I've allowed you 20 minutes to read a letter. I feel it's important to open it up to some, and I think I've listened to everything, and you got right down to your conclusion, which is that the Fox Meadow Condominium Association, as speaking through you, is opposed. So I think we can, at this point, ask anybody else if there's somebody else that has a comment on this point.
Well, we also are requesting, I'm going to put that out, that 2 current BLI rezoning situations, that land uses, that involve storage areas and general construction and that type of thing be transferred to, instead of a status of just needing a site plan, to be transferred to 4.73, needing a special permit. I'm going to leave you. I appreciate everybody's attention and hearing what we have to say. I'll leave this with.
I also take note of the fact that you retain counsel. The council has provided us a letter.
That's a separate letter, sir. It's totally separate.
If I'm not mistaken, this is in the Fox Meadow condominium. And isn't that?
The letter from MTC is a single owner, not Fox Meadow Association.
Okay.
And I apologize, our lawyer was not able to be here due to the letter. I have no need to read the letter. You all have a copy. It has been sent by mail, return receipt, and you have it by mail.
Thank you. And we'll consider it. I just received it tonight. I'll read it.
Yep.
To the extent that it's relevant, we'll discuss it at the next hearing as well. Sir in the back?
Yes, Kirk, please. When you put up these maps in the future, would it be any problem to demonstrate where the wetlands and conservation areas are within those boundaries?
Well, I don't think it currently the assessor's map has that overlay available to us. Nonetheless, I mentioned, previously it was mentioned that some of this land does contain conservation areas and wetlands, and that does not change. Okay, to the extent that some of this land is undeveloped, it's undeveloped because it is wetlands, and as a result, it's going to continue to be undeveloped wetland and protected wetland assets. So simply by changing the zoning does nothing to change the Wetlands Protection Act.
Is it your position that you will continue to strictly adhere to those?
It's my position that it's not this jurisdiction, the jurisdiction of this board to certainly to supersede that.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Town.
Just kind of adding to that, I'm looking at that parcel that does have some wetland running through it, and I'm just wondering, I've been told for years that it wasn't developable, so why is it on the table?
Because it's on Route 1.
A developer could perhaps acquire that as additional land and develop only a portion of their land, and this could be some contribution towards open space.
Well, I don't think you can spot zone. Wouldn't that be, if you skipped over something, there's no like spot zone, you can't do that, no?
It's not, well, we wouldn't, right. So just by, again, classifying it as commercial doesn't mean that it could be developed as such. Ma'am?
Hi there. Are there requests that have been presented to the town from external parties that have precipitated this thought of changing the zoning? And is that really what's something behind?
I'm not aware of any specific developer that's come forward and said, could you please look into this? But I am aware that some landowners have said that if this were zoned differently, that they would utilize their land differently as a result.
And then a further question. There was something that I saw regarding marijuana, and I don't really understand that at all.
The marijuana overlay district is not this district. So
Well, in the BLI district, cultivation is now a permitted use. The BLI, under the recent, the last town meeting where we passed the recreational marijuana, there was also a permission or permit for cultivation in the BLI district.
Not specifically in this.
No,
but
it's not really
to include that in the BLI district.
correct. And I think if I and Mr. Baker is right. In the spring we amended the zoning bylaw to allow marijuana cultivation in the outlying district, or probably in the business light industrial district, with special permit. Okay, so that specifically means that it's not as a matter of right. If somebody acquires, aggregates the adequate amount of real estate and come to the board and present a petition that makes sense for that site, and we have community support for it, then that's something we would consider. But certainly, without all those factors lining up, it's not something we would consider.
Specifically, special permit in the morning with marijuana product manufacturers, marijuana cultivators, and independent marijuana testing labs.
Yes.
Jenna Haig, I live over on Hillside, which I'm directly affected to in the back of that. So I'm assuming that dark blue line's the river?
No,
And they're
actually,
met up
this is
against
the-
it.
there is a river you can see here.
That's the river.
Yeah, and it does follow that, but that actual blue line is just the boundary of the hatched area, or the fill area, which this is the area that's being slated for rezoning.
All the area in blue is
Yeah, all
what's being
that area.
slated. So,
Yeah, that's all currently outlying district, and this is proposing to make all of that BLI.
I get that. I'm just making sure, since I back up to that, that they're gonna stay on the other side of the river.
Oh, yeah, this is the.
More than the other side of the river,
Yeah.
because there's setbacks from the river because of conservation reasons.
Right.
100
Okay.
foot.
My next question is, when you say light industrial, are we talking loading bays, bright lights at night, constant traffic 24 hours a day? What are we talking about? And are we talking about keeping the aesthetics that we hope to achieve in Raleigh at the same time?
I think
So it's kind of a double question
They
there.
bring up just a comparison of what's, potential in the outlying district versus the uses. So here's what we're looking at in the outlying district right now. By right, you could do single-family dwellings, townhome dwellings, open space residential development, and there's also the accessory apartments, agriculture uses, and remember there's the agricultural exception of the state level, which gives a lot of latitude for agricultural uses.
Okay.
In the outlying district, in which this currently is,
Right.
special permit is required for things like country clubs, day camps, non-commercial landing field for the non-commercial use of residents, and large-scale solar photovoltaic installations.
Okay.
When you get to the business, light, and industry district, you're talking about there's no real permitted uses. Everything either requires a site plan review or a special permit.
Sure.
And so what you're looking at in the light business BLI district, professional and business offices, services, medical dentistry clinics, restaurant other than formula fast food without live entertainment, veterinary hospitals and kennels, enclosed storage yards, and offices for general construction, landscaping, or similar contractors. That's with a site plan review. Special permit review, you can do research laboratories, facilities, wholesale trade, sales establishments, assembly, light manufacturing, dance halls, theaters.
So it's really up to the person who buys it and what they're gonna do
Yeah.
with
So there's
each
a range of
individual
uses.
little parcel.
Yeah.
And the overview of the planning for the special
Right.
permit.
Okay.
And I'd like to see a little bit more strengthening on that overview, because it's worked really well on an OSRD, a residential overview, when people want to do an OSRD. The standard goes higher. We've had some good luck on
I hope
Route
so,
1 on
too.
a couple of parcels, one being a software developer across from Gino's Auto Body, who's done a beautiful job there.
Yes,
And of course, Ipswich Bay Glass and the buildings that they've done down there.
right.
And we have reviewed their spotlights on them. We've had them move a few too.
That's fabulous to hear. Thank you.
And certainly,
Thank you.
to the extent that, the proposed use would have any of those characteristics that a neighborhood would find, without, perhaps not offensive, but at least to obstruct, we would certainly, consider it and create conditions if it was something we're going to move forward with. So if it's hours of operation, shading and screening so you don't see it, light cutoff so you don't get any light pollution, zero light, emittance from the lot, those type of things. And
Entry onto Route 1 and traffic, sometimes we ask for traffic engineers' reports, landscaping.
Because several of those roads around there will become congested as well, the small ones,
Well,
the Glen Streets.
the one thing though, all these lots
The Weathersfield.
only have frontage on Route 1, am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which means that any curb cut that could potentially be proposed would have to go through the Department of Transportation at the state level. We are not in a position to allow people to put driveways on Route 1 without the state allowing that to happen. So there's a lot, You'd have to have, yeah, a lot involved, and it would, you know, you're not gonna get, you know, I think investors would have to come in here with a real plan in place. It would take some time to develop something that would be workable, and I think that would, in itself, would weed out some of the type of uses that I think might not be exactly what we're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Joe
Excuse
Peterson,
me.
I would like to say that this board, over the past 15 years or so, has changed the whole environment of what Route 1 looks like. Any of us that have been in town for about 50 years can tell you, I don't want Route 1 to look like what it did when I first moved back here into town. There was no control over whatever was going out there. And as you said, some of those businesses now fall into that. If they want to change, there's a major way of, you know, the fencing place and a few other things.
Mm-hmm.
But how they have developed it, they have made the driveways, the buildings sitting back. I mean, if anybody wants to go back to the 5 places that were on Route 1 heading north when I first moved into town, you're stepping way back. And I think this Route 1 looks 1,000% better than what it has. And in fact, going north on it too. I mean, the development of the 24 or 28 condos up and through there, I mean, that was done nicely, and it's an open area, so we can't do anything without the state coming in and saying those driveways have to be there, and they're the ones that control the lights. So don't take it out on the board or on the people being negative. Remember, the state's involved in this because it is Route 1, the same as it is 95, and also 1A. So you don't do anything unless the state says you can do it.
No, you can take it out on me.
Sir?
No, we're good friends.
David Fields, Cross Street, just 2 quick questions. Does the town have a split tax rate?
No, we don't.
And the other one was, what was the reasoning for taking out the other parcels that were taken out?
One on the corner of Weathersfield, I didn't want it because it has a beautiful 1840s house and a sort of rundown barn on it. And if you create the zoning for that, that makes it even easier to take that down. Even though historic does have a 1-year delay on taking historic structures down. That's, in the front part of that parcel facing Route 1, you could figure a way to do it, but it gets tricky because we're trying to stick with property lines, not a 200-foot, 500-foot.
What was the first question?
Split tax rate, whether Crowley had one?
A split. We don't
A commercial versus residential tax rate, which we don't.
Thanks.
Ma'am?
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that your response to taking those parcels out on the intersection Route 1 and Weathersfield was because of the sheer dangerousness of it.
That's another reason.
Because especially with another development, that traffic dumping
Other
into
people
there.
were covering that. I'm an aesthetic guy. I like things to look good.
Yeah.
So.
My other question was, that was the first I heard about recycling facility possibly going out there. Is that actually a thing, or?
They're looking at it.
It's not something this board's even aware of, and nothing's been presented to us for consideration.
I do think, one thing we haven't really talked about is this one small cluster of parcels, 4 parcels that are adjacent to the New Shore Business Park that were going to be included. And you might want to see if there's anybody who is here who's concerned.
Is that south of Weathersfield?
South
Yes.
Okay.
But it's Ipswich Bay Glass and, well, this is North Shore Business Park right here.
So between North Shore Business Park and Weathersfield on the,
Doesn't quite go to this.
Yes.
North south outside.
It's North Shore Business Park, those 4 parcels. These are all residential houses right now.
is there anyone, any of those owners present tonight?
We have talked previously to one of these.
Right.
And he did not
That's
really-
not,
Excuse me, where the sign says North Shore Business Park, isn't that the former Schilling?
No.
No, that's Ipswich Bay.
That's,
No, they-
So North Shore Business
North
Park
Shore
is on the
Business Park,
left.
is that on the northbound side of Route 1?
yes.
What's on the north
It's
side?
319 the Report Turnpike, it's on the
That sign
northbound
that says
side.
North Shore Business Park.
Yeah, that's on the
That's on the
north,
northbound side.
that's on the northbound side.
Yeah. This is, what he means is the Ipswich Bay Glass Complex. Of
Yeah, that's what our
Yeah.
question was, that's what you
Yeah,
actually.
He may have misnamed it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just don't think that was presented properly on that.
Okay.
I don't know what he You know where it is.
Yep.
So in addition to the lots that you're seeing on this map, there's also some consideration to rezoning those 4 residential lots north of Ipswich Bay Glass between Ipswich Bay and Weathersfield. Certainly one of the owners, I recollect, did come forward and say he would, welcome that kind of a change. And that's why I wanted to see if there's anybody else, who was similarly situated. So, yeah. Anybody else have any comment on this matter?
I'd like to say for the Fox Meadows people that certainly we can work with some design review issues and buffer some issues because of the nature of your residential development in there.
Well, thank you, and I would just like to conclude just asking the board and Mr. Vega to look at that field parcel and the comments that we made in our letter on it, about, the type of parameters that are involved with all the wetlands. Almost a tremendous amount of wetlands, the vast majority of the parcel is wetland.
If it's a lot of wetlands and nobody can figure out how to get around it, it will stay exactly like it is. That's probably what will happen if that's
Thank you very
true.
much.
We don't know.
Mr. Collin?
Yeah, I just want to say I appreciate the board's responsiveness in addressing the issue on the corner of Weathersfield Street on both sides of that street. And I would also say that it's hard for me to imagine how any person who already owned one of the businesses on that stretch would invest in their business given the current restraints on them. So I think this is a positive move for improving the aesthetics of many of those businesses. That's not a guarantee, obviously, but at this moment, if people want to have businesses that have a more positive impact on some of a traveller's impression of Rowley, this is a necessary first step because otherwise it's not going to happen. Right. We were very lucky with the Mill Street Winery. They've done a marvelous job. Yes.
But we have work to do.
Yeah, further down there are some very good businesses, but they're not aesthetically particularly remarkable.
They are remarkable. Some of those predate back to Jones' era.
Come on, Joe, you didn't like the Denver Rock House?
I'll remember that, just remember that. That's one strike.
Just one quick thing,
sure.
the map that you just showed, is that what would be going to town meeting, or would there be more meetings before that?
There's absolutely one, there's at least one more meeting, which is the 13th, am I right?
That's the public.
That's the public hearing on this very issue. This is really informational, and
Okay.
nothing is being decided. At the end of the day, all this board does is present it,
Right.
get some input for it, and then make a recommendation to the town that would be then presented at town meeting.
So the
Okay.
next one is February 13th for this?
February 13th, correct.
Okay,
All right.
And that's a
Thank
phone.
thanks.
All right, so the next item is a zoning map bylaw change to create a new retail village overlay district on Route 133 Haverhill Street, near the intersection of Route I-95. And this is a little different in that, in addition to changing what's already outlined district, we're looking to create a new retail village overlay district, which is in the business light industrial district, but it creates even additional zoning requirements for any developer that sought to develop in this location. One thing that I think is always worth noting, particularly in Rowley, one of the biggest limiting factors in any development is the fact that we don't have city sewer. So anybody that wants to develop anything in this town, residential or commercial, always has the burden of figuring out where is their septic system going to go. And as a result, that does put a lot of restrictions, limitations on what can happen, particularly on some of these smaller parcels. But in this area, it does present an opportunity, because there are actually some large parcels, and there is some people out there that have, at least over the years, mostly anecdotally, suggested they would do something different if there were a different zoning bylaw applicable in that area. So, Kirk, could you, the Retail Village Overlay District, what characteristics does that present?
Well, so it's going to be an overlay district that will go over the existing, will overlay the existing zone. So that existing BLI zoning where ABZ storage and animal hospital, or I guess the
Muddy Creek.
I'm sorry.
Muddy Creek.
Oh, Muddy Creek, yes. Where all that is, that will continue to stay BLI zoning, but this overlay district will go over along with this particular, what we're recommending as a change to the bylaw, where if a developer comes in and wants to do some kind of a small-scale retail, village-style, mall-like use, then this would provide a set of criteria, framework for them to do so. So in a way, it kind of extends that the existing potential of that area to allow this one particular type of use. If somebody comes in with a proposal, taking advantage of that location at the western end of 133, right on 95, and opening it up to some more to commercial retail, which is not really as feasible within the business light industrial district. But this actually makes there are actually some special features that would go along with it. Like I said, it would be like for a small scale retail mall, and the way this is written is that the intent is that for the retail mall, the building would be pushed up towards the front of the property with parking in back, that there would be special architectural detail requirements, design requirements that go along with it as well. So I can kind of give you a little bit of an example, the retail village design criteria. Board members, if you will, this is all actually in the packet. The board would approve architectural design plan that was prepared by a registered architect. There's also, in terms of signage, special requirements for the wall signage and for freestanding signs. On-site parking spaces shall be located in the rear, not in front of any proposed building. The board would review a parking area plan that was prepared by an engineering professional. And there's also certain architectural landscape requirements for special landscaping, lighting review that would actually still go. This would all be by a special permit from the planning board. So if somebody comes in with a proposal for a retail mall of this type, it comes to the planning board for a special permit review, and that the board would apply these standards. In terms of material requirements, building height materials, which would be looked at as well. Certain exterior facade elements, gables, pitch, roofing, windows, cupolas, or decorative trim design. So the planning board would be looking at the architectural quality and the character of this of any kind of proposal that came to it. So that pretty much, I think, summarizes the. Is there any questions?
Sure. Ladies first.
No, go ahead.
About the design features, my wife was part of the neighborhood association down in Salem. She was very involved in trying to keep things from becoming out of character with Salem. So she was very involved in trying to keep a historical look to any new projects at the courthouse. They wanted to build this huge thing, they downscaled it. CVS had to put in brick rather than, putting in the usual CVS facade. Is this what you're talking about? Like, are you looking to have a certain standard?
Yeah, I think it would be a certain level of quality that would be expected. I think there's a lot of latitude given to what you have an architect actually on the board
Like El Tapatio, that kind of
looking
strip
for,
mall where it was
quality
all kind of
materials
design.
that are characteristic, that have character, quality, would reflect, that would be, reflect the theme, into a particular theme that would be.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Just a brief comment on this. My name is Cliff Pierce. I'm on the Board of Selectmen, and I was involved in the drafting of this bylaw. I mean, the basic intent is to preclude, not to allow your conventional strip mall, big box development, because that's inconsistent with the character of the town,
Right.
especially at such an important gateway to the town. So this would put the burden on the developer to come up with something that's architecturally interesting, consistent with the New England style of development. And that's basically the intent. Something that would be nice to look at.
And I think that's built into the proposed ordinance, the architectural review, and so I think that's comes through in the proposed ordinance. Ms. Peterson?
Yes. This is, I don't want to say how it is, but it was 15 or 20 years ago. This was originally brought before the town, and it was voted down. And I just so happened to have gone to a planning board meeting over a couple of developments on Newbury Road, and the subject was brought up. And I feel it is time. This is one of the win-win situations for the town of Rowley. It's on the outlying district. It's right there by 95. And if anybody goes to work or go down 133, they see the sign that says National Way. There is, 50, 60 acres out there that are all on Georgetown side. So they're going to allow anything to develop down there. One of the proposals that was brought up is, and I mentioned this to the board here, and you guys can remember it, I says, if anybody's been down to see what they've done down at the old Hilltop Steakhouse, okay? They have put business, very nice businesses there with condos in the back and the whole 9 yards. And that's what I'm looking for. Do you think it looks good? I'm in and out of town maybe once or twice a day, over to Georgetown or whatever, to go by and you see on the right-hand side everything looks good, and then you look over here on the left-hand side as you're leaving town, or the right-hand side as you're coming in, the house that's been boarded up there for 30 years, the gravel pit with the digger in there, I'd like to see something better there. It's a shame that the growing of the marijuana is on the Georgetown side and they're getting all the tax money. So we might as well pass this so we can start to get some money back into town to help the taxpayers.
In the back, ma'am?
No, me, Chris.
Sure. How you doing, Gene?
Jean Patrollo, Haverhill Street. I want to know, why is my property included in that? Because there's absolutely total wetland on it, except for my house and barn. And,
Chrysler.
No,
yeah,
it's
and
not too far.
Chrysler has the same problem. They have a lot of wetland too.
They're not included, Crystal.
Yes, it is.
Are you included?
Gene, you're not.
I think you may have been in an earlier draft, but
I
no.
think you're in an earlier draft. That's not Crystal Farm.
The big barn is.
That is.
That's Crystal
It's
Farm.
in-
First one.
But, and that being said,
You're on the,
is anyone from Chrysler here?
Yeah.
Yeah. I understand that this is something that you were in favor of, am I correct?
I am.
Oh, good. So I believe that last lot is Chrysler. But, okay.
Yeah, because we have, if you're talking about parking in the back, first of all, there's no way to get to the back because it's all wet. On the side you can get in.
Yeah.
But my main concern is safety too, because there's a lot of accidents there. A lot. So,
Again, that's a state roadway that would require same kind of DOT permitting for any kind of curb cuts.
yeah, okay. So that was my concern because my property is pretty wet. And
done to look well and not like, you know.
You know, is it Pingree Village that's, so I think Chrysler, then Pingree, and then the water lot, the water access road, and then your lot, right?
Yeah.
So this is all north of Chrysler.
Was there ever any consideration made to make it mixed use instead of just retail?
I've talked about that with the board.
Well, because it's outlying district in an overlay, retail is already allowable in the part of the business and industrial, isn't it?
It's just an
Yeah.
overlay, so it's already residential.
Yeah.
Like with condos.
So it could be, that is
It could be?
a possible use.
I'd like
Well,
to-
not under this bylaw.
Yeah, the only real, yeah, there's not the.
Not the way it's drafted now.
Okay.
the general
I'd like to
retail
see
is
some sort
small
of retail on the ground floor and then residential on the upper floors to
I thought
cover.
that was what was talked about in the previous meeting.
We're talking about it, but the current draft does not
Opportunity
allow
there.
for residential. Unless you change it, or,
Put it in.
huh?
You can put it in.
Well, some of the things.
Ms. Berkowitz?
Hi, relative to the parking, would you mind, Mr. Baker, putting that back up again? It seemed to me, just from reading what was up there, I don't know if the police or the fire officials have been consulted. Public safety generally, when you have commercial properties in the front and all of this parking in the back, it seems to sometimes present itself with a challenge for public safety. So I don't know if you've had any input from the police or fire. Have you, Mr. Baker, or anyone, in drafting it?
We don't need to get into that detail at this time. I mean, the architects and engineers can solve that problem.
So as
Well,
far as
when-
no parking in the front,
When specific projects come before the planning board at that point.
they can work, or
Oh, absolutely.
there's a waiver in case. I mean, who knows what cars are gonna be in a few years? It might be something different. I don't know, you know. Yeah.
That we don't control.
But it, from a safety standpoint, you know, anytime that there's, well, if the building is in the front and there's a lot of parking in the back, and it's, you know, it's just,
outdoor lighting would be.
yeah, and it's security cameras, yeah.
The police actually
You're
would
right.
comment on every.
You don't
Yeah.
understand the issue, but it
Yeah.
really isn't an issue.
That's all, I was
at this
just
time.
curious as to
Yeah,
the,
every project would be, public safety is always considered,
Yeah.
fire departments, the
That's-
chief.
that's all I
the fire-
was-
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's not,
Everywhere.
it should be looked at as the same thing as a dark alley, presenting a dark alley type situation, or somebody, you know, where you encourage, but it's not like that. It's only that the store fronts would face the parking lot and face towards the back. But it's a way to like cover the, you know, keep the parking, you know, prevent it from being seen in front of the road.
As far as, you know, there has been some suggestion that we try to include some residential mixed use in this district. Does this sound like something that people would welcome and want to see? So I think it's something we should at least try to see how we might be able to amend the proposal. And so, again, this is coming up 2 weeks from now on the 13th for consideration. If that meeting doesn't come to any kind of consensus, then we'll potentially continue and either make a recommendation, you know, with the intention of having some kind of a recommendation before the town meeting.
There's a lot of money you could make when
Yes.
the stores shut down, closed down for the day.
Yeah, right, keep it, I mean, share parking, share a lot of,
Bring in tax
Lottery
money.
for people that want a downsized residence, make that a priority so we can solve some of these issues for people that
With an
are
elevator in it.
bigger houses.
So are we talking about like a second story?
If you'd have to put it on second story, as long as you
Well,
make it
within the-
available for people that want to downsize.
Within the height limitation.
Not
Within
stairs.
Second, third, or 2.5, what are we, 35 feet?
Yeah, I think 35 feet.
Measured from the front.
Part of the tools are low income.
It's not called low income. It's called
Yeah.
affordable, and we
Yeah.
can have a pretty good salary. But we are short on affordable units. But I think Phil's comment about
Thank you for taking that.
scaling down.
so I think that's something we'll try to, you know, make sure we include in the next discussion we have about this.
Thank you.
Okay, ma'am?
Is this Arbors and Iris property?
That's certainly part of it, yeah.
The storage too?
The storage, absolutely.
Okay.
That's his too.
Yeah. Anybody else have any comment on this point, Mr. Cullen?
Yeah, the ramp that comes off 95 and comes onto 133, that's hellacious.
Back to
And
the
there,
state.
Yeah.
and so, well, I recognise that it's probably a state issue, but it needs to be kind of factored into whatever is going on there, because that is a scary ramp.
I think that could be perhaps
That's
the
Georgetown.
limiting factor for anybody out there,
Ramps
because
in
the town's got to
Georgetown.
consider that as well. The ramps in Georgetown, and then so is Healthy Farm.
Yeah.
So, that seems to be getting a lot of the.
Are we done with
Ma'am, I see your call, but I did see a hand out there in the back, so I can start there. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Brian DePersia, Weathersfield Street. I don't know if you saw the town comment, but there was an article on this particular area in there, so the cat's out of the bag. But being that this is an overlay district on top of the already existing zoning, it seems like it precludes some of the items such as a strip mall or big box store.
Mhm.
Does it enable any of the restrictions that are in the BLI already? Like as far as, I'm talking like a retail village district, you're gonna have, maybe boutique restaurants or shops. You're gonna have, potentially maybe coffee center, coffee shops or something that might come in. That, unless you enable some of the quote formula restaurants, you're gonna maybe lose out on types of coffee shops or a type of retail center that you're not going to enable by having those old restrictions on the BLI side.
We control drive-up restaurants pretty much. Yeah, drive-up restaurants, but they're like in terms of other formula like a Starbucks.
You won't get that with a drive-through. There's no drive-throughs allowed, right?
Yeah, one drive-through.
Right, so that it was allowed, and once McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts came, they were gone again. It was taken off from the zoning.
I'm not sure if
I mean that this is it's an overlay district, so if you want to attract a certain type of aesthetic or area, you might need to enable some of the things that are restricted in the general zoning for that.
So enable formula fast food of some type, like non-drive-through type users.
Why wouldn't you have a drive-through?
But they
in New
can get
England?
that right up the street in Newburyport, or they can get that right down the street in Danvers. And I thought we were trying to kind of keep with the aesthetics of the small
Danvers
town
is not
growth
down the
at
street.
time. Well, okay, maybe not Danvers, but they're still getting McDonald's and stuff as soon as they get on the highway.
Like Trader Joe's was there.
Yeah, do you like
No.
Trader Joe's?
You're not going to get a Trader Joe's. It's a Class A event, but any real estate agent would know that.
Starbucks,
This is obviously an issue that a lot of people in town are concerned with, is the drive-through window. I almost feel like it's great, I'm glad it was settled 20 years ago, because it's still a hot button, it sounds like.
Well, don't we want to be that little town that, stop in that little town before you get to Newburyport?
Yeah, right.
It's always Newburyport.
George Washington's coming through town again, going up to Newburyport.
Well,
I'm trying.
is that,
I wasn't there, I was a
we
kid.
asking that whether we can consider enabling some of those type of uses like big box stores? I think big boxes.
Maybe not necessarily a big box. I think
And one thing I'll say about the big box question, though, that's a developer that's coming in here with a lot more clout than what we're used to seeing. That person, if they bought an adequate amount of money, they'd come to the board and discuss a zoning change, and which we would consider, depending on who it was and what they were proposing. So we're not precluding it by creating this. We're waiting for the developer to show up with the plan.
Sure. It's just kind of the consideration to be taken, because I've seen there are Trader Joe's that are in the size of a Tapatio restaurant.
Right.
They aren't huge. And same thing with somebody
But we
mentioned
don't need
Starbucks.
another Walmart or
No,
No,
and
they
we
won't.
need to restrict that. That wouldn't be allowed. No, it's just
right.
You're right, Boylston Street, Trader Joe's.
Joe, go ahead, Gene, go ahead.
I have one more point.
Sure.
We live quite a ways from maybe a mile or two from McDonald's, and we have McDonald's trash and Dunkin' Donuts trash in our yard. We all the time. So we like it not to be a trashy place.
Sure, no, fair enough, and I,
Gene, come back on the board.
I'm coming. Oh, yeah. I don't know. Should I?
ma'am, I'm sorry, please.
Yeah, hi, sorry, you probably said this, but what is that zoned right now?
Business light industrial.
So, so it hasn't attracted any, BLI kinds of uses?
I mean, you have that storage facility out there, you have the veterinarian hospital and the daycare. And in fact, since I've been on the board, there was a construction lot went in, what was the landscaping company went in, right.
Does the retail, is that a more profitable kind of venture for the town? Or generally speaking, is the BLI more profitable?
Well, it is a single tax rate, so it's really based on the value of the real estate. We don't tax revenue. So it really, I think when the town considers what type of businesses we attract, in addition to creating some revenue, we're also trying to create some convenience for the town, for the people in town. So
I think if you included some possibility of residential in there, you get better use of 2 floors or 3 floors in the 35 feet, and that would increase the tax base. And it also might create more of the village quality of what's there if you can keep retail on the first floor. And make it a place. I mean, the next zoning ordinance that we're going to talk about, we're trying to talk about a place.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
anybody else that has any comment on the retail village? Good, so again, February 13th, it's back on the regular agenda. So the last item we have is a zoning map change for the Raleigh Station Transit Oriented Development Overlay District, RS Todd, on the properties abutting the MBTA station owned by and abutting Didex at 395 Main Street. So I'll give you a quick overlay of what's going on here. We have a landowner in town, Didex. Didex runs an educational supply distribution company. They've been there for a good long time. During the late 80s, I believe they acquired 25 or 90s, okay. Used to be Raleigh Printing, and they came to the planning board to seek a permit to establish their warehouse and offices on that 25 plus or minus acres, at which point they said that they would build their facility on the front 2 or 3 acres, and the town agreed to allow them to, through the zoning board of appeals, right? Or was it the planning board?
No, that was the zoning board of appeals.
Zoning board of appeals granted them the special permit to develop that project with the condition that they keep approximately 20 acres that abuts that development as not open space but undevelopable. Now that owner has outgrown its space, and they're seeking a new location, hopefully here in town, but they want to make sure that they can exploit what they have there at the Didex property, and their options are to find somebody that wants to buy their warehouse and their 25 acres of unusable land. That's not an easy sell. Or they could, under the current approval that they have, I think they'd be limited in dismantling the building if they were to develop the remaining 20 acres as residential land, because we did tell them if they were to develop their commercial facility, they could not develop the residential facility. And they came to us with an offer that seems to make a great deal of sense, which is to say, would the town consider acquiring the Didex building as a gift or a donation from Didex. And what they would ask in return is that we consider allowing them to develop the adjacent land in a way that we're proposing right now. And when they look at the overlay, they see that one of the amenities is right there is the MBTA. So they came to us with the idea that we consider creating a rally station transit-oriented development overlay district, which really is a district that would be to serve this specific parcel to create some residential development that can benefit from its proximity to the train station. So we're going to try to attract people that might not have two cars, might not need two cars, that might use the trains to get in and out of the city every day. A lot of benefits that go along with it, and the town also sees a real opportunity to take possession of a high-value property that has a lot of opportunity for the town to do some really terrific things without incurring a tremendous amount of cost. So that's what we're considering today. So Kirk, would you tell us a little bit about what the transportation district would look like?
Yeah, I've got it here on the screen, what these properties look like. The Diane building is here up front, and the property that's in the rear is what we're talking about. Looking at developing essentially multifamily type units. And also taking into account that this is actually also included into this district is this showing MBTA parking lot here. So part of the idea of this, the transit-oriented design, part of this is that you have a high-density residential development that you provide pedestrian access to a mode of transportation, in this case the train station. So they would be looking at putting some kind of a pedestrian access from the residential development to that parking area to provide access to the train station. So it is an opportunity to take advantage. And there is actually, like transit-oriented design is a concept that, there's a little word I found on the actually Institute of Transit-Oriented Development, which they call it, which they say TOD, the fast-growing trend that is creating vibrant, movable, sustainable communities. The idea is to create compact, walkable, pedestrian-oriented, mixed-use communities centered around high-quality train systems. So, yeah, the idea is pretty much, it's feeding into a goal that, like, as recently this last year, the town passed a housing production plan. One of the overall goals is quality of life and pedestrian, more opportunities for pedestrianism and access to transportation options other than vehicles. So it's a small goal, but it actually is a good it is an opportunity.
Is that going to be affordable housing? Parts of it, is it going to be, you're going to reserve so many to be?
Well, there's not really
there's not a requirement at this point for an affordable or moderate income housing component. It is something the developer could consider presenting, but not something that we're requiring. Keeping in mind that this developer, for instance, would be donating a building that has a high value, so the town would be receiving a tremendous benefit if we were to be able to make something like this happen.
If anybody wanted to see what it might look like, if you take the train, Beverly Station and Salem Station, the old Toby Ford place is now being put up for condos so that they literally are going to walk across the street and get on the train in Beverly. So this is what the proposal is, and it's similar to what we had out by 133. This is the trend of what's coming for types of housing I know when we first moved into town, everybody was building splits and everything else, and now if you look around, look at the size of the houses that we have compared to what was built back in the 70s and the 80s. So it's the newer trend of what is going on for housing. And to meet the affordable housing, you have to be honest that it has to be, is it 10% if a developer comes in to give? Well, the amount of everything going on and the growth, we're never going to get past, are we at 2 or 3% for the amount for the state?
Yeah.
And I don't know how many, except for the big cities and towns, that meet that number of their 10%. I don't think there's any of the neighboring towns that can meet that percentage of 10% for affordable housing. Georgetown does because of those apartments on the other side. Yes, they do.
They get full credit for the property.
Yeah.
Compare it, but don't compare it to Beverly. This is going to be lower scale.
Right, it is, but if people want to see, this is what it's for. So they get out of their house in the morning, if they don't have the car, and they take the train, whether they work at Lynn, Chelsea, or Boston.
Or if they're retired, they can go to Boston in 55 minutes and be at the Paul Revere House in 10 minutes, you know?
So the train doesn't break down.
If the train is running on
Well, it's been pretty good.
Yes.
The Didex
I wanted
building
to
will be
change it to
a town-owned
electric.
building in the middle of this.
Yes.
Not quite in the middle, but
No,
as you can
at the
see,
beginning of it.
let's go back to the hatched. So right here is where the Didex building currently is. This driveway would stay the same, a roadway would go in here. This parcel of land would be donated to the town, and that's where the building sits. The town could use that for municipal uses, and what municipal use the town would propose hasn't yet really been determined.
I was fortunate enough to walk I've been in the Didex building a long time when it first came up, and it's a great building. And if you wanted to compare costs of what needs to be done to the Didex building compared to the annex, it is unbelievably cheap.
There's already an elevator.
I walked with Mr. Twombly back there, walked the property, and it's part of it that is not on behind his house is a major gravel pit 100 years ago, probably, and helped build the Boston and Maine Railroad.
Right, but also, and a lot of that too is you're showing a lot of the 19 acres that's there, but a lot of it's not buildable because there's a lot of wetlands around. And on the back of my property where Dave was saying, it cuts into Didex, and mine is conservation. When you're going to get into developing in there, you're going to run into all kinds of problems. So you got a lot of wetlands.
We're going to leave that up to the developer.
Well, and also too to the Didex building, so if this is ever to go down, if something happens to that, we just spent a lot of money, our taxes went up for a new school, new fire department, new police department, and you're talking about municipal building, why don't those guys move up there? And if Didex wants to sell their, if they're looking for a way out of here, why don't you make it an option for them that they have to stay in Raleigh to keep their tax dollars in town as well? And you're putting something out for them so they can get out of Dodge here. What happens if the building's an old building? What about the roof? Are you going to come tax money to repair a roof?
I'm sure that the town would have the property appraised and inspected before they would take it out to.
And also, this was tried in 1991 by the former owner, Donald Kent, to develop that property, and not this board, but the previous board shut him down on this, trying to do the same type of thing to develop that. So.
But he didn't offer it to the town back then.
That's right.
But what exactly is it that you want this building for? I'm missing that information from what you're talking about. Why do we need another building?
I'll address that if I can. The selectmen, their current plan, and this could change, would be to use it for municipal offices. Currently, our main municipal building is the annex building. However, we can only use the first floor of that, and people in there are really on top of each other. It's really, really cramped. There's also the council on aging. So, and we can't use the second floor because it's not handicap accessible. In order to make it handicap accessible, we would have to put an elevator in that would cost over $1 million. So that's been ruled as an option that's just not practical.
$1 million for an elevator?
Yes.
Because it's a very old historical building, and there were so many things that need to be done to it.
Right, so the plan at the moment, and this could change, would be to leave, the Council on Aging would get to take the entire first floor. The other municipal offices like the Planning Board, Conservation Commission, the Board of Health, and some others would move to the Didax building. And possibly the building inspector, possibly the Rowley Light Department, because it's a pretty good sized building. They have the office space looks really nice, and then they have this big bay area where you could park trucks. So
There's no space in the fire and police department buildings?
No,
well, that's for the fire and police. We really can't move other offices into them.
Is there an option of perhaps, that's an interesting point, is there an option of perhaps having a type of municipal complex where the police and the fire, and then maybe a new building for municipal offices so that things would be clustered in one area?
We're not building another.
No,
we're not building another.
We're not building another. No way.
I certainly didn't mean a debt raise.
Bonnie, you said you were
yeah.
going to you're donating a building, right?
Right? Yeah.
I'd be more than happy to build a building for that particular.
I said donate.
Yeah. Is there? But I mean, you always look at feasibility and alternatives. I mean, to try to
I've looked
have
at it.
has that been studied? I think she brought up an interesting
When I
point.
looked at it, there was some people in the town that were poo-pooing the idea of Didex, going into Didex.
No. It's probably
It's
a
a
great
great
idea. I don't know. I'm just curious from
It's
a
handicap
resident's
accessible in all
perspective.
the office space. It's got high bay space and warehouse space.
So there's no other alternative that's been looked at whatsoever. That's the only
Yes.
alternative.
Well, every other alternative would be very
Big bucks.
expensive. This would not be
The
very
annex.
expensive.
Right.
This is a cheap way out.
Well, it's also, I think it's also consistent with good stewardship. I mean, I think it also provides benefit.
I mean, David's an architect, so I would defer to him, but it looks to me like a high-quality building.
You haven't watched it?
Yes, and before the town were to accept it, we would do our due diligence and do
It's a
an
great,
inspection.
It's all
I think it's
updated.
in excellent condition. I've been in there, I haven't been in for a few years, but when I was in there before, they have been Didex, and to say to let them stay in town, I would love them to stay. They have been wonderful to the school system. They would come in during the summer, set up classrooms for their catalog, take the pictures, everything, and then leave everything for the Pine Grove School. So you couldn't ask for better people to run a business in this town.
They have said they want to stay in.
They do. And it's a shame that nobody knew that the PBDX's museum was getting chilling toys, because those guys would have jumped on that, and we wouldn't be $90,000 in the hole in taxes.
You've got to let that go.
That costs us a lot of money.
You gotta realize, I'm just saying, and we take it to our grave.
You can tell we've heard that before.
Yeah, exactly. So, is there any questions we can perhaps try to answer about this? And this rendering in here, I should also point out, nothing about this is coming to a proposal, but nonetheless, we're considering a bylaw that would create maximum setbacks so that we would expect to bring the buildings closer to the street, give it more of a village feel, create some, allow for some mixed use, so you could have a little bit of some two-family, some standalone houses, perhaps a four-family unit, trails connecting them, parking in the rear so that along the front streets you don't have any garage doors. All the garages would be in the back off of right-of-ways. Trying to make an aesthetically creative and welcoming type of community, a little bit different, something that people could, again, the idea is that even with a family of 4 or 5, you only have one car because you're hoping that somebody's using the train. Bike paths to get from here to there, some walking paths to get from here to there. Just some things that hopefully would attract, some the right kind of people. I mean, not the right kind of people, but the right kind of people of all walks of life. And
I didn't catch you.
Yeah, sir.
Ron Margaret, 397 Main Street, Young Realty Trust.
I was just wondering why I was included in this overlay district.
Convenience. Convenience, if you don't
Those are
want
mine.
Well, I mean, what's your feeling on being included in it?
doesn't
I don't
affect
know, I don't know what I can do with my property, whether, do I thought, this is gonna be high-density buildings, however you say it.
Probably doesn't affect you much at all, but it.
Well, if the guy that's gonna develop this can use different setbacks and put his buildings closer together, can't I?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that does affect me.
Does.
All right. As far as, I'll still be grandfathered, I've got a machine shop there and a house and everything else. Does that, when that comes up for reevaluation or reassessment for taxes, does that change the value at all?
Probably not really.
Probably not.
I'd love to give you a firm answer on that, but the use would stay the same. It's really fair market value of the properity that's going to determine.
Well, that's what they is it more valuable.
Yeah, and I'm trying to.
You might want to talk to the assessor about that.
Okay. Can I get a list, that slide you were showing, or whatever that's called, the elements of our SPOD that you were showing, is that online somewhere?
I can actually,
Or I can come by your office and get a
Can
copy?
you,
come by the office.
All right.
Can you change?
You can certainly have this copy as
A
well.
couple words,
All right, thanks, I'm sorry.
instead of rear alleys,
Okay.
change it to connecting alleys. It's not really rear alleys, they're back paths and stuff. And I don't know about the 15-foot setback from,
On the perimeter setback,
I think it should be a little bit more towards the residential existing on the right-hand side. On the left is nothing, is DBS's.
So we're still working out, like, specific for
Yeah.
the dimensions, things like that.
Kirk, how many units would there be? Employees in there? 45?
Yeah, I think, we don't have specific code.
Do you have any idea how many units or how many people you expect to live?
It's dependent upon the septic system again, as you well know.
Well, there's also a formula that limits the number too.
So, and I think it's really going to take a developer to come forward with a proposal before we can really think about a lot count or a unit count. But based on some of the information that we've heard, and including, most importantly, the formula to determine how many units can go in there, you're looking at somewhere between, I think between 40 and 45 or 48 would be the maximum if they were to get all the elements right.
And there's design review by the planning board on all of this, right?
Absolutely. Well, the ordinance isn't before us at this point, but I think it would certainly have to include all those design review,
Just like an OSRD.
I like oversight.
screening,
Landscaping.
There's no developer that's looked at it or anything like that?
Didex owns the property. They're speaking to different people at this point about who might develop it. But we haven't, we don't even have a zoning district yet, so we haven't considered a petition
So
in
you
that
just wait
district.
until somebody brings a plan and presents it to you?
That's correct.
Kirk, I have a question to you. If we rezone this and they decide not to give us the building, is there anything?
Well, that's part of the deal.
Okay. So we can't rezone it, then they can tear down the building and build all these close together houses that they normally couldn't, right?
They do it.
I just want to thank the board for the format. It's a much calmer environment.
Oh, good, thank you.
I'm trying to throw some humor in here.
This really was an attempt to rework this whole process. So I'm glad it's more receptive to this.
Thank you.
I just have
Who's
one
got
more
it?
question. In setting up these zoning requirements or these districts, is this in a place where we can say if you're going to put in a development, you have to do it green, or you have to make it a solar situation or something like that?
We pay attention to materials, but I don't know that you can really
Make them
limit.
do
I think you have to change the building code that applies throughout the town, right, or something.
But I am well known for a certain product that cannot be used. And it begins with V.
Yeah.
Vinyl.
No vinyl. That's not environmental, Dave.
That's environmental.
But to that, to your point, no, I mean, I think the answer is we can't create a requirement that they do all LEED certified construction or anything along those lines. That being said, because it is a transportation oriented development, I think that one of the elements we would be looking for is things like charging stations within the community, bike racks, things that would encourage different modes of transportation and different forms of transportation. So, well, not quite a green community.
I think the
Progressive elements.
The developer probably would say, this is a convenient development to public transportation to Boston or Newburyport if you want to take a short trip. I've never paid going to Newburyport from Raleigh, but it's guaranteed.
But using green building materials too, I think she was also.
I understand what she's saying, but this, that's.
No, I know you can't make them do it.
That's
I
covered by the
I think it has to be done.
But the developer, they find, might do that.
They just, but they just upped the requirements on insulation in buildings again, so.
Sure.
Yeah, Brian, first, again, just to comment on that, some of that stems from the fact that we haven't adopted the stretch code in the town. So we can't impose requirements on some builders to include types of green energy or building code standards that are newer. To kind of go along with the fact that this situation would give DIDAX to the municipality, maybe we can have some construct in there where the building's evaluated. I don't know how old it is. Do you know how old it is?
Well,
25,
45 years part of it?
Something like that.
Where part of it is.
Some of it, okay, so in any case, the building be evaluated and some, envelope be, evaluated to say, okay, let's, as part of this exchange, we ensure that it uses the least amount of water possible, has the least amount of load on the municipality, energy uses, because now that is a burden on the municipality. It is a municipality building. So if we can somehow, try to set that up, set this building up so that it is the least
Sort of already
impact.
happening. It's happening by not doing the work that we were going to do on the annex. And you're saving, if the annex was a non-public building, you would drop the cost of the renovations by at least a third, But the numbers are extreme because you've got prevailing wages and everything else. So I like your idea. I think that some of that could be included in the building, but I think it's somewhat up to date in the office portion. But it's nice to know if it's got only 2 years left on the rubber roof or whatever roof there is there.
Is it possible to encourage DIDEX, whoever's going to work with DIDEX to come up with competitive bids and to try to coax some kind of green elements, whether it's solar or, green elements.
We now have solar for the whole town.
Right. But, that is really going to be, that's a market for us, I think. What do people want to buy and what the developer wants to build as a result. But you got to keep in mind, this whole thing is, and it's not the town's objective right now, but it is a green development because it's trying to reduce the impact of people bringing cars onto the roadway. It's going to use the public transportation that's there.
Taking the density of the 45 and compacting it, you've cut down on impervious.
I understand that part of it, but the kind of thing that can really showcase Raleigh is we're not only a historic community, a rural community, but we're a cutting edge community with cutting edge.
I think this is cutting edge. I don't know. I think the developer has to propose the green side of it, and the building code does a great deal of that.
There was just one other comment. You mentioned a mixed use portion, and is it my understanding the only part that's mixed use would be the municipal use potentially of DIDEX, or are you encompassing any type of other mixed use opportunity?
I only.
That was in the
we
slides
mentioned
and the
two agenda items up, because it was the,
on Didex. No, it was Didex. It was on the Didex
They just
slide.
made it
That little,
With the Didex part, the mixed use is municipal
So
and residential.
that's what I was asking.
I'm
So
sorry,
that's
yeah,
it. So no coffee shop.
Actually, they should
nothing
allow
like
a
that.
coffee shop down there.
No.
It's a big enough village, jeez. A little convenient, like, corner store.
Why, you looking to open a new business?
Good idea. It's big enough little development to have a little corner store.
so,
If it's a walkable community.
Yeah.
green community.
so again, this is on the agenda for the 13th. By that time, we hope to have something closer to a proposed ordinance that
Right.
perhaps we could be talking about specifics.
That was my point, yeah.
We do, yeah, we do. Actually, we're working to make a motion. We're very close.
Make a motion.
I need to talk.
Yeah.
Or would there be another, would there be an opportunity for, if there's gonna be, like, it's probably an awesome possibility, but even if some other communities would have a small area, maybe the size of one residential unit, that they would ask the developer to set aside so that it could
I've already
be
thought of it.
like a,
It's a place in Boxwood that is
Yeah.
over 55.
but that could be for like, little
Because if you
coffee
want to
shop or
run a
sandwich.
family birthday party and your unit isn't big enough,
Yeah, right, something like that, yeah. Or even one that would be like
invite the owner.
make, because we all go to the train station and wait.
Do you know where the train station is?
Of course. Frequent user.
So, unless anybody has any comments on any of these items, well, specifically this item, we're gonna, there's a motion on the floor to adjourn the meeting for tonight, and, any seconds?
Second?
All in favor? Aye. So,